Welcome to the Courting Happiness podcast. This is a space where self-care becomes part of your day. A space where you learn evidence-based strategies to help your life, share it with those you love, and cultivate well-being at work. I'm your host, Dr. Kortni Alston. I'm a former news director, television reporter turned happiness scholar, TEDx speaker, and transformational trainer. I also understand hardships. While working my dream job in television, I lived a nightmare suddenly becoming a young widow after 86 days of marriage. I became committed to learning more about resilience, healing, and happiness. This is how I discovered my area of research, which is positive psychology. Now I'm living my calling of training individuals and organizations on happiness. And my new chapter begins with being happily engaged. The Courting and Courting Happiness is about a true courtship. I like to say commitment with happiness. The K in courting stands for the vulnerability of sharing my story, inspirational interviews with phenomenal people, the infusion of positive psychology, and so much more. You'll learn how to commit to your well-being one episode at a time. I hope you subscribe and share. So, are you ready? Let's get started. Welcome to episode 125. I'm Dr. Kortni Alston. I am so happy that you're here. So look, I have a couple of quick questions for you. Are you a boss with your boundaries? Think about it. Are you a boss with your boundaries? And if you're wondering, what do you mean? What do you even mean about being a boss with your boundaries? What I mean is, do you know how to protect them? Do you know how to protect your boundaries? And today we're going to discuss how to tackle it and safeguard your well-being. There's a great article. And, I talk about this website so very much. They publish so much great work, and that's positivepsychology.com. They published an article titled, How to Set Healthy Boundaries and Build Positive Relationships by Dr. Joe Nash. First, I love this. Dr. Nash tells us in terms of how to set healthy boundaries and how to begin it. And she says it begins with having a level of self-awareness, good communication, and assertiveness. Now, what she means by self-awareness is being clear about the expectations of ourselves. Plus, in terms of good communication, it really helps us with clarity, right? When you're able to be very clear in regards to what those boundaries are. And I love this in terms of assertiveness. It involves expressing feelings openly and with respect. Now, setting healthy boundaries requires you to assert your needs and priorities as it relates to your self-care. Think about it. It helps you really prioritize your self-care. So Dr. Nash does a wonderful job in this article providing all of these great evidence-based strategies, citing phenomenal scholars that can really help in terms of us understanding the value of healthy boundaries. She also shares Nidra Glover-Schwab's 3 easy steps for setting healthy boundaries. Here's step 1. Be clear and as straightforward as possible. So you do not have to raise your voice, but it's about being clear and straightforward as possible. Step 2, state your need or request directly in terms of what you like rather than what you don't want or like. So state your need or request directly in terms of what you like rather than what you don't want or like. Step 3, accept any discomfort that arises as a result, whether it's guilt, shame, or remorse. Right? That can be challenging when you set boundaries and you're going, but wait a minute, maybe I could just do it. Can you really do it? You could, but what does that mean to you? Or what does that mean to the other thing that you have allotted time for? So this is what I also love about these steps is that it also provides some examples in regards to the article, I should say, provides great examples of healthy boundaries and what they include. Decline what you don't want to do. Decline what you don't want to do. That could be challenging, right? Just like I said earlier, especially if you are a person that's a recovering people pleaser. By the way, I have my hands up in the studio. You might not hear it. I mean, you might not see it, but I certainly wanted to share it. I'm a work in progress in that area. Even though here it is my area of research, probably because I need these answers because being my area of research, right? But sometimes you have to decline what you don't want to do. There's a lot of things in my life I found myself doing that I didn't want to do, but I did it either to please the other person or, wanting to do so many things for so many people. And that's one thing I love about me. I love being able to serve and support. But what I've learned along the way is when you're doing so much and not being careful about your boundaries and being mindful about your bandwidth, it can result in burnout, emotional exhaustion. So it's important to make sure that you're doing a true check on what you want to do, what you don't want to do, and what you're doing, because you may not want to disappoint someone. And unfortunately, sometimes you may have to disappoint someone. Expressing your feelings responsibly, right? So I think what's important in terms of that is understanding the value and the impact of how we express our feelings in regards to when we are creating boundaries as relates to our life, our goals in life, or our work life, or our personal life, our goals in our personal life, our relationships in our personal life, our relationships in our professional life. So it's important, right, to express your feelings responsibly, especially since Dr. Nash in her headline is delivering creating these boundaries and still having positive relationships. So making your expectations clear as opposed to assuming the individual will figure it out. I have done that a lot in my life, especially when I was younger. And it's interesting, my beloved mother who passed away in 2016. I remember when I was a kid and I couldn't understand, like, well, why would the person not understand? And my mother reminded me, you are assuming that person knows. That person is not like you. That person may not see it the way you do. That person may not have figured it out how to figure it out. Right. So I love that Dr. Nash is pointing out making your expectations clear as opposed to assuming, oh, that person has to know. Right. Or come on, this person has to see it. So Dr. Nash also says that setting healthy boundaries requires awareness of different boundaries that are focused on relationships. So here's some more dynamics. Yes, it's great in the article, and I will have the article online at drkortnialston.com/podcast, episode 125. But what I love is that it's an infographic, and it's this great image of the different boundaries that are focused in on relationships. So we're going to talk about them today. One is time, she mentions. And I'm actually sharing what she wrote, and this is, verbatim in regards to her article, because it's really impactful. This says, time, how much time you spend with someone or doing something. How much time you spend with someone or doing something. For example, I can only stay for 30 minutes. One of my dearest friends, who I talk about quite often, Ardea Myrick, who's been on this podcast. And she is phenomenal. She is one of my best friends. She is an associate provost. And one of the things that I love is the fact that I'm surrounded by so many amazing people in my life that we are also friends and we mentor each other. And one of the things she loves to share with me is you may need to tell that person that you only have 5 minutes, or you may need to say that I have to we have to table this for now, but I certainly want to be able to talk with you more. Let's schedule time for us to have some more time. I mean, she is such a master, such a boss when it comes down to boundaries. Another person who I greatly admire, who listens to this podcast, and that is my mentor, Dr. Julie Dodd. And she and I met when I was working on my PhD. She is was my dissertation chair. As far as I'm concerned, she will always be my dissertation chair, even though I defended my dissertation and graduated with my PhD. But what I love so much about Dr. Dodd, I was always watching her. And Dr. Dodd, if you're listening, I want you to know I have always been watching you. I remember I was watching Dr. Dodd before Dr. Dodd became my professor and before she became my dissertation chair. I remember seeing her during graduate orientation, and I was just so in awe of how she managed a room of about 1,000 graduate assistants in this huge room at the University of Florida, if you could only imagine, and all of the great advice she shared. But then when she became my professor and then my mentor, one of the things I valued is that how she managed time. Our meetings always started on time, and it always ended on time. And when I say, I mean, literally, wasn't 2 minutes before. She always did a wonderful job managing her time, and was able to move things and making sure that the conversation or the meeting was always on track. So let's just say if the car decided to go on one street and then let me go and lean over on that other lane. Have you ever had conversations like that, or maybe meetings like that? Well, Dr. Dodd and Ardia Myrick do a wonderful job with steering it right back, going straight ahead and moving forward. So there's so much value and impact when we can manage our time. So Dr. Nash shows in this infographic, mental. She says, the freedom to have your own thoughts, values, and opinions. She says like this, like, I respect your perspective, although I do not agree. I love that, right? It's being respectful, it's being really, it's really having an elevated conversation, right? I love this. The freedom of having your own thoughts and values and opinions. And the interesting part, to go back to my incredible mother and the great advice and the wisdom that she shared, which is so interesting because in the studio I'm wearing her pearls, and just to share some of her pearls of wisdom, right? When we understand how different we are, there's a great freedom in terms of being able to freely and authentically be you, and then welcoming and having a growth mindset of hearing another perspective and being respectful of that perspective. So Nash also mentions emotional, how emotionally available you are to others. And this is her quote, as much as I want to support you right now, I do not have the emotional capacity. I feel like that should be a t-shirt. So, so listen to this. As much as I want to support you right now, I do not have the emotional capacity, right? That is really important in terms of understanding your boundaries. If you do not have the bandwidth, how are you really going to serve? And so I remember when I was being trained, when I was a news director. And so when I was a news director, and for those of you who may not know, a news director is a person that literally is running the news organization, running the newsroom, is making hiring decisions. It's also making decisions in terms of programming decisions. And I was a news director for an NPR member station in Baltimore. And one of the things that I loved during my training, and I believe it was with one of my fellowships with the National Association of Broadcasters, NAB. And I say this, I believe, because I actually was awarded a couple of fellowships through NAB. One where I was being trained at Cox, another one was where I was being trained at Georgetown Business School. And one of the things I remember was that learning from these esteemed presidents and VPs of broadcasting, other news directors, and the value of the whole, I call it the airplane story, right? Because I've heard it many times, but I was so grateful to hear it from people in the industry that I'm in and hearing their best practices. And that's if a plane is having trouble, and as much as you want to help the other people, right, you have to make sure that you're putting the mask on yourself first. So you're in position to help and to serve. And as a person that trains executives as it relates to workplace well-being, it's so important to start with you. So if you are in a position or you have found yourself really pulled thin, you need to really think about, what can I do to pour into myself? What do I need? Do I need to take extra time off? Do I need to make sure I'm leaving at this specific time? What that need looks like, because it's going to be very challenging to serve your team if you are just burnout. As another mentor told me one time, which is another famous saying, you give from your saucer, not your cup, right? Think about it. If you're giving from your saucer, that's what's pouring out of your cup. If you're giving from your cup, you may be depleted. So it's important to understand those dynamics. I love this quote, as much as I want to support you right now, I do not have the emotional capacity. So here is material. She mentions monetary decisions, giving or lending to others. And here's another quote she shared. I always lent you money last week, so not again right now, right? So she's giving really doing really giving us all great advice in regards to thinking about those boundaries. And here's another one, internal. So self-regulation, energy expended on self versus others. And here's another quote. I have been social all week. I need the weekend to myself. It's interesting. I went to a conference a couple of weeks ago, and I was speaking there about trauma reporting, and it's with an organization that both my fiance and I are a part of. And he serves on a national board. And so when we got to the event, the conference, it was Friday, and the conference was kicking off on Friday. My speaking engagement was Saturday. Normally, I would, as soon as we get there, and he and I are going to these things together, because I love when we're doing all these things together, especially when we can go to a conference together, because that may not always be the case, especially with me being an academic. Like, I can go to, or really a public scholar. There's so many different venues and different conferences that I'm a part of that may be in the industry of journalism and broadcasting and all things communication, and not. And partly because I also have an MBA and I speak across multiple different industries. But that weekend we were there together, and that Friday he asked me, when we got to the hotel, he says, hey, are you going to go with me to the town hall? And there was a dinner, and then there was another function after that. Now let me also give even more context. I was so tired after work that normally when I return home and I know I have to fly out to an event, I will like immediately start packing as soon as I get home from work. Guys, I couldn't even do it. I had to take a nap. That ended up being a couple of hours. And then I spent the whole night going back and forth, washing clothes and all that kind of stuff. And this is the first time I think I've ever had a flight. I think our flight was like at 10 something in the morning. And we had to leave for the airport, at least, I remember Ken mentioning, let's leave at least at 7 a.m. I've I've been so tired. I waited to pack at 5 because I was so tired from sleeping on and off, to wash clothes, and to not even having the bandwidth to think about, well, what do I really need to pack? So by the time I got to the venue, I was tired. I was probably almost more tired than I was when I got home from work, because at least now I can feel like, okay, mission accomplished. I've gotten off the plane. I'm now in this new city. Whew. And I told him something, that as much as I wanted to be there with him and to be able to reconnect with so many of our friends and so many other colleagues in the industry, I said, Ken, I'm actually going to sleep. I'm going to sleep all day in the hotel room, and I'm kind of going to check out for a moment. And so he went to the town hall. He went to the dinner. And he came back home and he told me all about it. And I will admit, I'm glad I did it, because if I didn't, I wouldn't have the bandwidth to really perform well and to serve well when I had to publicly speak. And we both had speaking engagements at the same conference that Saturday. So again, I'm really grateful that I listened to myself, even though I wanted so much to be with him, and he's phenomenal, and enjoying our friends together. But I had no energy if I were to see a friend that night. And so sometimes we have to say, okay, I need to, like for me, I needed that day so I could spend all day with friends on Saturday. And I did. Ken and I went to everything together on Saturday. I was at his speaking engagement. He was at my speaking engagement. We were going to other people and being supportive of the organizer and all of the amazing people that made up this incredible event. And one of the things, again, I'm so grateful for is that I listened to myself, and I slowed down, and I rested. So it's so important to make sure that you have true understanding of self-regulation. All right, here's another she shared: conversational topics that you do and do not feel comfortable discussing. I would rather not be part of this conversation. So actually is a quote. She says, quote, I would rather not be part of this conversation. I'm like looking around in the studio because, I'm thinking about past episodes, especially during the holidays, and your families are coming together, but that can be a little tricky depending on especially maybe politics. Maybe might be a lot of different dynamics. I feel like if I started with one, I feel like I need to go through the list, right? But it's so important to understand what topics that you're not comfortable discussing. Here's another, and it's last but not least, physical. She says physical. Privacy, personal space, your body. Quote, I prefer not to hug people I do not know. And I giggled because, we are all different. I'm a hugger, you know, but I'm also very careful. Like, I'm a hugger with friends and I'm a hugger with family. I may not be going around walking around and hugging strangers unless it's something that we are both open to, right? But I love this in terms of respecting someone's personal space. And that's goes back to that statement. As much as I'm a hugger, I'm always respecting someone's personal space. Right. All right. And so it's so important that we respect others as it relates to their personal space, but we also honor our personal space. All right. So that in terms of being physical, I love this. So what does all of these dynamics, all of these strategies, all of these evidence-based tools that you've learned, all of this great work that has been cultivated in this article, that Dr. Nash has done a phenomenal job in terms of really bringing in all of these different scholars in terms of their work. What does it look like for you? What does your boundary plan look like for you? So she mentions this. She also cites Career Contessa, and she has 8 tips, and we'll discuss 3. You can go to drkortnialston.com to check out the article, as well as her list that's in the article. And the article, does have a YouTube video as it relates to Career Contessa. And she mentions communicate directly, be upfront yet professional. And this is as relates to work. So let people know when you're available, how you will handle emails that arrive in your inbox outside of work hours. Communicate directly. You know what I started doing? Because as a happiness scholar and a person that focuses on well-being, and I've had quite a few things I've been juggling, especially this past semester, and multiple projects and so forth. And then you also have to think about your well-being, right? And plus, since that's my area, I don't believe in just sharing the research. I believe in living the research. One of the things that have started doing is scheduling emails. First off, I don't think it's a good idea that a person sees that I am responding to an email at midnight. I have this thing called, I'm not going to wear busy. So I don't think that's a good idea. I think there's a value to the person understanding, okay, these are my hours. So I don't think it's a great idea to start emailing at midnight. I also don't think it's a good idea for someone to receive my email at midnight, especially if you're a part of my department. I don't think it's a good idea unless it's time sensitive, right? That's one thing. But if it's something that can wait until Monday, then I schedule it to Monday or the next day, 8 a.m. So, I think that's important in terms of your own boundaries, but then I'm always being empathetic and thinking about other people, their space, their time, and not feeling, yeah, you need to respond to me on a Saturday. If it's not priority or time sensitive, it can wait till Monday. And then I love going right in Outlook and not clicking send, but clicking that little arrow, and it says schedule send, and I can customize it, or I can it'll tell me, tomorrow or whatever other day it is. But that's something that I love, that I've adopted, and I started to share with another member of my team, because I think it's important as a department, but it's also important individually, right, to be mindful of that. So here's a bonus tip. I hope you like my bonus tip because that was my bonus tip in regards to the value of scheduling those emails. Again, it's being mindful of your boundaries, but it's really being highly empathetic to everyone around you. So Career Contessa also says, get comfortable saying no. It's okay. It's okay to say no. Now, you might not be able to do it. As a manager, I often ask this question: what can I do to support you? Because it's so important that people feel supported. I also recommend you saying it to yourself. What do I need right now to pour into my well-being? And if it's you can't, it's okay. No means, sometimes no can mean, many times no can mean that you're saying yes to you. So sometimes you cannot take on or carry it all, right? I shared an image that I found online, and off the top of my head, I believe the image said something like, just because the person does a good job carrying it doesn't mean it's not easy. I mean, not heavy. I'm paraphrasing it, but I'm like, yeah, right? That's so true. Just because that person carries it well doesn't mean it's not heavy. So you got to think about all that you're carrying. Anne Lamott says this. She cited her in this. No is a complete sentence. Thanks, Anne. It's no is a complete sentence, but saying that and living it, it could be challenging. It could be challenging. Well, actually, so be kind to yourself and give yourself grace. Give yourself grace throughout the process. And the last tip we'll talk about is this. And we've kind of informally talked about it. Take time off. If you're leading an organization and you're working to create a culture, I'm telling you, it's important for you to create a culture for someone saying, I need time off. That's the most important culture you create. If someone comes to me and says, I really need time, I again go back to that question. How can I support you? And when you're constantly asking that question to your team, and making sure that they understand the value that you are going to support them. And then on top of that, when you are reporting to supervisors that are saying the same to you, it's a wonderful ripple effect. I'm telling you, it's great. It is a great ripple effect in regards to your supervisor saying to you, I got you. What can I do to support you? It is one of the things that I swear that we need to just, like when they're doing a wave in a stadium, that needs to be a wave all over the world. What can I do to support you? And when you're creating that kind of culture, then the goal is making it okay for someone from your team to say, I need time off. I need a moment. It's important. We're human. We're human. My phone, I use her a lot, or him. I actually have a male voice for Siri on my phone. So, I need to recharge my phone. We need to recharge. So it's important to make sure that cultures are created within work environments that allow that welcome it, that value it. My favorite scholar, love all things Dr. Brene Brown. And she says this, when we fail to set boundaries and hold people accountable, we feel used and mistreated. So I hope these tips will help you feel safe and secure and improve your overall well-being. Always remember that your well-being is your most important job, and I'm always here to help. Thank you so much for listening. Let's continue this conversation online. Email us at podcast@drkortnialston.com. That's podcast@drkortnialston.com. Join us on Instagram at Courting Happiness. Don't forget, that's courting with a K. Also, I hope you join our private Facebook community. You can find us at Courting Happiness Podcast Community. Our private Facebook group is a safe haven to share, meet more people looking to build positive relationships, focus on well-being, and create a happier life. Now, are you ready to spread happiness? We hope you subscribe and share this podcast with your family, friends, coworkers, and all the important people in your world. We release a new episode every Thursday. Congratulations on your continued commitment to your courting happiness journey. Thank you so much for listening. We want you to be well, be happier, and be kinder to yourself. We can't wait to see you next week.